Project Cycle Management, Submodule 2.2. In this submodule, you will learn what project cycle management is, how it can be relevant for a small NGO such as, perhaps, yours, and get acquainted with the PCM phases, namely programming, identification, formulation, financing, implementation, and finally, evaluation. In this submodule, you will learn that 1. Project cycle management represents all the activities and decisions made during the lifespan of a project. 2. The project cycle management, as defined by the European Commission, consists of 6 phases, namely programming, identification, formulation or appraisal, financing, implementation, and evaluation. 3. The project cycle management is used by donors, especially in regard to development aid projects, but the model can be relevant even to small NGOs when preparing, executing, and evaluating any donor-funded project. 4. Applying the PCM model in relation to your donor-funded projects can enhance the quality of your project design and management, but can also strengthen your role in attaining the donor's policies. The European Commission defines the project cycle management as the whole of management activities and decision-making procedures used during the life cycle of a project. Donors use the project cycle management, also PCM, to ensure a qualitative design and management of development aid projects. An important tool in PCM is the logical framework matrix that will be discussed in the next submodule. The European Commission uses the PCM model since the early 1990s. Further, we will refer to the Commission's model of PCM used in connection with Europe aid projects. Within the PCM, the European Commission works with 6 phases: programming, identification, formulation or appraisal, financing, implementation, and evaluation. These phases are seen as subsequently emerging, but at times some of the phases can be intertwined. The duration and importance of each phase may vary for different projects. It is important to note that the evaluation phase continues the cycle by integrating lessons learned from past projects and programs into new funding programs or project ideas. Let's go briefly through each of these phases. During the programming phase, the European Commission, together with relevant stakeholders, analyzes the situation at a national or sectional level to identify problems and constraints, as well as opportunities to address these. Based on this, concrete objectives are identified and agreed upon, and a relevant and feasible funding program is launched within which stakeholders can prepare and submit project proposals. During the identification phase, the European Commission screens ideas for projects submitted by eligible applicants, usually in the form of concept notes. The phase may also include sectoral, thematic, or pre-feasibility studies to help identify, select, or investigate specific project ideas. The outcome is a decision on whether to invite or not the applicant to submit a full project description. During the formulation phase, applicants whose concept notes were accepted in the identification phase detail their ideas and submit a full project description. The European Commission then assesses these project proposals for feasibility and sustainability. Amongst the outcomes of this phase can be a decision to reject a project or to start preparing the first draft for the financing proposal. During the financing phase, the financing proposal is completed and considered by an appropriate committee within the European Commission. A final decision is taken whether to fund the project or not. A grant agreement is signed between the donor and the successful applicant. During the implementation phase, the granted project is executed and monitored to oversee the actual progress and ensure that it is on track to achieve its objectives. During the evaluation phase, the donor assesses the executed project to identify the achievements and lessons that can be further used in the identification or even programming phase. So far, we have seen how the PCM is used by donors, in our case, the European Commission. But you may be asking yourself why and how this model is relevant to you. Well, that is actually very simple. Imagine the PCM as a gear. Applying the PCM model, the European Commission shall go from programming to evaluation and back to programming over and over. But to get through all the phases of the project cycle management, the European Commission needs somebody to utilize its funding programs defined in the programming phase, and that can be you. Yes, small NGOs like yours. Metaphorically speaking, by implementing a project under a funding program defined by the Commission, your NGO's project acts as another gear that helps the European Commission move its own gear. Factually speaking, by implementing a donor-funded project, you operationalize your NGO's vision and mission, but also contribute to attaining the donor's policies connected to the respective funding program. Furthermore, based on the results of all these projects, the European Commission will evaluate the extent to which its mission has been achieved and define new missions and co-related funding programs that your NGO can further utilize. Project cycle management is, therefore, a mutually benefiting process where both the donor and the NGO that receives donor funds contribute to attaining each other's missions. But wait, this is not all. As the European Commission sets a vision and a mission in the programming phase and defines a specific funding program in response to those, so did you when you have set a vision, a mission, and a strategy for your NGO. Now, you have identified the needs of your beneficiaries and actions in response to those needs in accordance with your organization's strategy. You have secured donor funds to cover the costs of these actions, and you move forward to implement them. You evaluate and learn from your interventions, define follow-up actions, or even revise your vision or mission. Now you can see that when you work with a project, you go through a similar cycle as a donor, but on a much smaller scale. Furthermore, your NGO and the donor not only contribute to attaining each other's missions, as we have earlier seen, but also give each other inputs for their future work. Now, let's look closer to the Commission's model of PCM and describe its phases from the NGO's point of view. In the programming phase, you will elaborate a strategy to attain your NGO's vision and mission. In this regard, you will analyze the situation at a national, local, or sectoral level to identify problems, constraints, and opportunities. You may research past projects and activities to provide precedent and direction for future ones. This process can be annual or multi-annual, and further ensures a link between your organization's overall strategy and its individual projects and activities. In the identification phase, you will generate project ideas that respond to the needs of your beneficiaries and are consistent with the strategy of your organization developed in the programming phase. You will typically analyze the relevance and the feasibility of these project ideas, for example, by consulting your beneficiaries. Assess the complementarity character of your project ideas with other existing or past projects. Propose innovative elements. As a result of this phase, you will have elaborated an initial draft of your project or a concept note containing such elements as: what activities do you want to do? To achieve what tangible results? To remedy what situation? To have what impact? A useful tool in the identification phase is the logical framework matrix. Learn how to use this tool in developing and managing your projects in the next submodule. In case you need the consent of other members of your organization or perhaps your statutory board, secure this before you proceed to the next phase. In the formulation phase, you will generally describe in detail the project idea conceptualized in the identification phase. Simply put, you will write a project based upon a call for proposals launched by a donor. Most often, your donor will also provide you with a template to describe your project idea. This template helps you think the project through and answer questions that allow the donor to assess the relevance and impact of your project. Typically, you will elaborate on the problem and needs that you address, your target group, aim, and objectives of your project, your partners, if any, the relevance of your project to the donor's policies, the activities that will be executed, the expenses connected to the execution of your project. Some donors may ask you to present other documentation, such as the logical framework matrix, detailed planning of the activities, partner identification forms, documentation proving the financial capacity of your organization, etc. Before submitting your project, make sure to carefully read the call for proposals and the program guide launched by your donor. If you submitted your project for financial support to a donor, the financing phase is when you will be waiting for the donor's decision. Depending on who your donor is and the complexity of the funding mechanism, you may be waiting between a few weeks and several months. Always consult the call for proposals to know when a grant decision can be expected. Keep an eye on your emails, as the donor may ask you for further documentation. Behind the scenes, the donor will organize and conduct the process of evaluating the project proposals received under its call. This may be organized differently, again, depending on who your donor is and the funding program it operates with. For example, if you applied for a youth exchange under the program Erasmus Plus of the European Union, your project proposal will be assessed against the eligibility criteria by the relevant national agency and against the qualitative criteria by an external expert. Given that your project proposal is successful, you will sign a grant agreement with the donor. Remember that in many cases, a donor will only co-finance your project, leaving you to cover a part of the costs. Therefore, you may need to use the financing phase to secure agreements to supplement your funds. There is no single recipe for achieving this. Use your network, your project partners, your organization's resources. See, for example, submodules 1.2 and 3.1 of this course. Assuming that you have secured the necessary financial support for your project, the implementation phase is the time when you turn your idea into action. At this step, you will deliver the results and contribute effectively to the overall objective of the project, manage the available resources, and monitor the progress of your activities and the project overall. You will start with practical preparations in order to deliver your results, such as update your implementation plan based on changes that may have occurred meantime, recruit additional staff and volunteers, set up logistics, profile the projects in the local community, and so on. During implementation, you will need to monitor the progress of your project to determine whether you execute the activities as planned, you attain the outputs envisaged, your spendings are in accordance with the project budget and the grant agreement. If you developed a logical framework matrix in the formulation phase, use it to monitor your project. Otherwise, refer to your project description, where you should have described your monitoring procedures and indicators. Monitoring your project will allow you to take project management decisions on the go, such as change the activities that you do or change their order, or even end certain activities if they do not lead to the planned results. Change priorities, reroute resources to ensure that the promised results are achieved in time. Determine whether you need to amend parts in your grant agreement. For example, if the situation has changed drastically, if you want to reallocate your resources, etc. Do not be afraid of changes. There is probably not a single project that has been fully executed as described in the formulation phase. A helpful tool that can give you reflection in this sense is the change diagram, found in the resource list for this submodule. Remember, however, to confirm any changes with your donor. Finally, the evaluation phase is where you will assess an ongoing or completed project to determine whether its objectives were reached. In the evaluation phase, you will look at such questions as: was your intervention effective? Did it lead to the desired change in the lives of your beneficiaries? What are the expected and unexpected impacts of your project? What can you learn from your project that you could use for consecutive projects and actions? Evaluations are typically made at the end of the project. Projects with a long duration often have a midterm or several intermediary evaluations in addition to the final evaluation. Evaluation can also take place even years afterwards to assess the impact over time. See the evolutionary versus revolutionary indicator for value creation. If you were evaluating a donor-funded project, you have already, in the formulation phase, planned how the evaluation will be conducted and what indicators you will use. Refer to your project description and evaluate accordingly. You may use a range of other tools in your evaluation process. For example, the logical framework matrix if you developed one, VAP evaluation forms, or other tools that you can find under the resource list of this submodule. Although the evaluation phase puts an end to your specific project, it also sets the basis for a new beginning. Use the learnings from your project into your next identification or programming phase. In conclusion, project cycle management can ensure that an individual project of your NGO is in line with the strategy of your organization. It is relevant to the problems of your target groups and the donor's policies. It helps you to pre-evaluate whether the objectives of your project are feasible and therefore achievable within the specific conditions of your project and organization. It helps you to think your project through from problem analysis to monitoring and evaluation and understand why certain questions are present in the project application. All in all, PCM can help your NGO to enhance the quality of your activities and strengthen your organization's role in attaining broader policies set by donors. In this submodule, you have learned that 1. Project cycle management represents all the activities and decisions made during the lifespan of a project. 2. The project cycle management, as defined by the European Commission, consists of 6 phases, namely programming, identification, formulation or appraisal, financing, implementation, and evaluation. 3. The project cycle management is used by donors, especially in regard to development aid projects, but the model can be relevant even to small NGOs when preparing, executing, and evaluating any donor-funded project. 4. Applying the PCM model in relation to your donor-funded projects can enhance the quality of your project design and management, but can also strengthen your role in attaining the donor's policies.